don't think we made the film with any conscious effort of carrying the torch for Doctor Who. It was literally a fun project over the summer. I've been making films for a number of years before we did the Millennium Trap, and we'd done 2 previous Doctor Who adventures, neither of which were frankly any good. Great for learning the craft of filmmaking, but rubbish to watch. And Millennium Trap was kind of the last time that a lot of the group were together to make a film, and there were quite a number of new faces, like Nick, for example, playing the Doctor. But it was really an exercise of, at last, I have the opportunity to make what will hopefully be a really good kind of homegrown production. So it was really for our own benefit, and we weren't at that time thinking about the wider implications of the Who world. Although as time went by and word about Millennium Trap spread and people saw copies and feedback filtered through via emails and the internet and so forth, it was wonderfully gratifying to find we'd done something that people liked and thoroughly enjoyed. But that was very much a bonus that came to us after the event of filming. It was just done for fun.
I think Millennium Trap has such a good reputation because it was a good Doctor Who story. It had everything you needed in it. You could have taken, I think you could have taken the script out from when we did it and given it to Philip Hinchcliffe or Barry Letts, and they did it, and it would have worked just as well. And that's down to the script, which was just a good, solid Doctor Who romp. It had everything in it that it needed.
What's really good about this film is that it captures the whole essence of Doctor Who. It's got all the ingredients that you would have in a BBC-made Doctor Who film. It's got that sort of tension at the end of each episode. It's got the obviously the Daleks and things, and it's got the Doctor Who solving everything. And I think just the way it's been written and the way it's presented is just very, very true to the normal Doctor Who episodes that we're used to seeing on television, particularly of the older, sort of more traditional sort of Doctor Who things. So I think that's why it's so popular.
Black and white was sort of forced upon us in a way. We had 3 cameras, 2 Super VHS and 1 VHS, which we couldn't line up to give the same colour response. So there was a very sound technical reason why we didn't, because every camera looked slightly different. Plus which we knew it wasn't going to be an expensive looking production. And there is this conception that a lot of the black and white stories are a bit ropier. So it was also kind of an artistic decision to get away with things looking a bit tackier than they might have done if we'd had some money to spend on it. But a lot of it came from the fact that black and white Doctor Who just seems to work so well. So there were practical reasons and artistic reasons to do it. Plus some of the army material we had was actually RAF. So the RAF blue and army khaki looks exactly the same shade of grey when you go black and white. So that was also a contributory factor.
I think that largely down to the production values in the script, which started down to Rob and what he could do and what he saw and blah blah. So I think it's basically the structure of it, and the fact that it had good location work and it had a breadth of vision and it had a scale of ambition in it that wasn't too ambitious, but not too small. It was just about right.
A lot of the story came from mixing those ingredients that we remembered with fondness from our childhood. And so in a way, the story sort of evolved naturally from that kind of process. There was also the indication of what locations we'd have available to us. I knew that Fort Nelson would be very accommodating, which gave us a certain amount of military hardware. We also got to film down at the HMS Alliance Submarine Museum on their mock-up nuclear submarine. So I knew we kind of had access to those sorts of locations. So those things going into the mix start to dictate where the story is going to go. And I had a few set pieces like the Doctor's chess match against himself, which I'd kind of had in mind for some time as an opening to introduce the character. And so it was a good chance to use that. So it came from a variety of inspirations. I couldn't honestly say, I sat down and said, right, now what can we do here? And then created something to sort of satisfy that. It really was a question of looking at all the opportunities that were available and trying to maximise those opportunities in the course of the script.
We weren't really trying to reinvent it, I think. We were actually sort of going back and looking at what had been successful in the past, and inevitably, because we did it in black and white eventually, the sort of first 6 years or so. So I don't think we were sort of overstepping the mark by saying we know the way forward. We're saying we know the way back and how good it was, and here's a bit more of it.
It's captured so much of the essence of the original Doctor Who series. I mean, I watched some early ones as a little kid. I'm watching this on reflection on when it's completed. It's just captured the essence of it, I think.
Well, it's been such a hit because of the sheer enthusiasm, of course, of the loony who set it all up.
Nothing had been on for a while. It was in the middle of the huge hiatus, and people were interested in anything happening, whether it was magazine articles or fan stuff, and there were all the other videos and the audio things sort of about at the time. And I think it dealt with things with a great affection, and people recognised that. So it didn't really, you didn't have to worry too much about great expectations and huge production values. You just had to do something with affection, and I think it does do it with affection.
Doctor Who magazine ran a feature a couple of years after we'd made the film about homemade Who films. And we'd actually sent our one up a couple of years previously, just on the lines of, hey guys, look what we did in the summer, what do you think? Heard nothing, and the next thing we knew, there was this, I got a phone call from Nick saying, have you seen the magazine this month? And there was a whole article about homemade Who, and Ashley's Devious was on there as well. And it had made the shortlist, Millennium Trap had made the shortlist of the final ones that they'd watched through, and ended up being the most highly rated of the lot, which came as a major surprise.
You see the stuff that's gone into it and the work that's gone into it, and you think, well, I've got to do this because it's going to be fun. So the things that sort of impressed me about doing that was seeing the sets for the first time, things like that, because it was done, as far as my memory tells me, in the Ashcroft Arts Centre, which should have been a big empty space. And when we walked in, it was not a big empty space. It was a TARDIS and some hallways and other things, and you get carried away, you get swept up by that sheer enthusiasm from the director and writer.
There was a moment, because I'd worked in the Ashcroft Art Centre in Fareham so many times on various different things, and a whole section of the Art Centre had been made into the spaceship with the Daleks, and just popped back from lunch and had a look, and they were shooting a scene, and the lights were pulsing on and off, and there was these two Daleks having this conversation in there, and it really creeped me out. It took me back to when I used to watch it when I was little. Report.
Previous adventures which we'd done had begun to feature Jim Harper, who plays Dr. Jeffries in this, as the Doctor, and he was kind of our incumbent actor. But in the 6 or 7 years between filming the Metamorphosis Effects and Millennium Trap, Jim had become a professional actor, he moved to London, he had a new family. And so I'd kind of thought that coming down for a 3-week irregular performance as the Doctor was really kind of going to be out of the question for him. So that was why I was recasting the Doctor.
I'd done the Doctor Who play the year before, so, and presumed that would be it.
And when I saw him in Planet of Storms, I thought, that's the kind of charisma I need for the Doctor. And happily he agreed to play the role. When
I first read the script for Millennium Trap, it was obviously a different Doctor, because Rob had written it for a generic Doctor. But I remember what struck me was that he didn't have a companion. He was alone. He was on his own. Whether that was through choice or circumstance, I don't know. But there was something in the script. I remember this quite clearly. It came out to me that the Doctor in the Millennium Trap is a real outsider. He's really quite a loner. And that sort of gave me the hook for that Doctor. He was different to my stage Doctor and different to subsequent Doctors, because also it was the first time I'd ever done anything on camera. So I was aware of going from this to this. So I think my thought process in doing it in that was just to underplay it very much, because that was what I heard was what you're supposed to do. And so the character of the Doctor Millennium Trap, bearing in mind that he was alone, not lonely, but alone, and the fact that I was underplaying it, that's where he came from.
Oh no, not unit again. Well, I'm not playing today. Every time they have one little problem, who do they call?
There was no rehearsals. There wasn't time for them because we were filming it in weekends in between Rob doing this video course, and we'd literally turn up either in the studio or on a location, and it would be make sure you learn your lines, etc., etc. So we'd all learnt our lines, theoretically, and it was just right. Well, we'll do it like this, and Rob said, "Well, the camera's here, the camera's there. You'll come in there, and you'll do this, and blah 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 blah. Let's go for rehearsal, and we'll take the rehearsal in case it's any good." And quite often it was.
So it was very much a question of set the cameras up, see what angles we could get, and then get the actors to run through it, and hopefully pick it up as we were cutting live. As much as we could was shot with several cameras, and was cut live as we went along to save on editing time. In those days there was no editing on computers, it was all recording from one tape to the other tape in post-production, which always gives a lesser quality result. So the fewer stages in that process, the better. So a lot of the actual filming was kind of make it up as you go along. I had a kind of plan in my head as to how I wanted it to look. So I always had a pretty fair idea how it was going to come out on screen, but it wasn't as meticulously planned as perhaps it shows. I'm glad it looks like it's been planned, because a lot of it was very much on the hoof.
On-set improvisation. They come about in a number of categories. There's purposeful improvisation, as in I'm trying to make this really authentic, on the edge, spontaneous, feel like it's really living the moment, and none of that happened. Then there's the improvisation that happens because you've forgotten what you were supposed to say, and a lot of that happened. Then there's the improvisation that happens because you turn a corner and what you thought was going to be there, a Dalek, is actually somebody half-dressed with a piece of plywood on their head, and there's that kind of improvisation. And then there's the stuff that I thought was going to be really good, which Rob cut out.
I think it was quite tightly written, and I think because a lot of us hadn't done a huge amount of acting on camera, I mean there were one or two that were very experienced, but there were some of us who hadn't done a huge amount, you tended to stick to the lines that you were given because you think, oh gosh, this is what it is, and you knew that when you're filming that you need to, things are always done quite tightly, and you're sort of conscious that the way it's written is probably because of the way it's actually going to be cut together later on. I mean, there were obviously times when people sort of cocked up and things went wrong and stuff like that, so there would have been a bit of improvisation then. But I know personally, I find it actually quite hard to improvise, particularly in that sort of circumstance, and there's always that sort of thing, oh God, you're wasting time, and with filming you just need to get on with things. So I don't remember specific periods of improvisation, no.
I think there was, to a certain extent, when we were struggling to remember our lines, but what came out made sense, but if you were following the script you would have pulled your hair out. But I don't recall too many occasions when it went so awry. Rob said, can you actually do that again, because that was dreadful. It probably happened once or twice, but I don't remember.
I think scripting the Daleks, people make the mistake of assuming you have to script them purely with that whole sort of running around, ranting, exterminating kind of thing. Whereas if you just think of the Daleks as being another character, then it sort of frees you from that constraint. I always liked the 60s serials, particularly the David Whittaker ones, where you did have the Daleks having conversations of sorts. You know, it's always to the point and very much, you know, tied up with the plans they're working on. But if the Daleks are a technologically advanced species, they can't do that just by ranting.
All 2 perimeter patrols. Carl attack group has just passed outer defense perimeter. The Doctor has been identified with them. Unit 9 will engage them at long range. You are ordered to inflict minimum casualties. The Doctor must enter the base, but not suspect a trap. All other
It's like the Mini or early Penguin paperbacks. It's a classic piece of design. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And on screen and on stage, they are really quite terrifying because they're not anthropomorphic, they haven't got legs, they look alien. To work with, they are hilarious. And this is the key thing. No, you know, little sort of, in the theatre it's called the coup de masque. You make a joke and you look at the audience, I'm going to break the rule now, look at the camera, you go, ha ha ha. And that kind of look, and no one can do it like a Dalek. Because Daleks, you're just stood there waiting for a shot, chatting away, and one of the Daleks will go. And it's just hilarious. And it then takes half an hour before we can do the shot. No one can do it like a Dalek can. They're the best at put-downs, never invite one to a cocktail party.
Well, the closest I had to work with the Daleks was the one particular scene where I was taken prisoner by the Daleks and had one either side of me. And the challenge there was just not to laugh when they turned and looked at each other and these two whatevers came across in front of me. That was really funny, but I didn't really interact that much with them.
The first scene I filmed with a Dalek brought to me the oddness of working with them, because I remember corpsing. I don't know whether it came off on screen, but Vin grabbed me when he was being hypnotised by the Daleks, and Danny came trundling on. I just thought, Danny's in there in this lump of silver sprayed plywood.
But you do feel they've got their own little characters and things. And particularly when I had to actually play a Dalek once, which was horrendous because boys can do Dalek voices, girls don't do Dalek voices. And you could probably hear each time I did a Dalek voice because it's sort of slightly higher and I don't quite know what to do, but I was just told you had to keep going up at the end of the sentence, and I've made a real pig's ear of that. So it's quite interesting sort of actually having to look at that, because that's something I would never ever have considered. But I think people, I don't know whether the Dalek operators got quite attached to being in their Daleks. I don't know. It looked horrendous because it was so hot, and Phil, I know when he would come out, he'd be completely sort of sweating buckets from having been inside a Dalek.
Now there I can see that there are reasons to really hate the Daleks, because I do remember it being limited space, self-propulsion, and we filmed it in the summer, didn't we? So it would have been hot, probably a bit smelly inside of a Dalek, as you can imagine. But I did a voice, and that was fun, especially when you get an outtake, because you can do a Dalek swearing, which is always funny, but it's a cheap laugh.
The Thals stole the element to prevent us.
The use of the Quarry was very interesting because it was almost an immediate sort of, oh yeah, this is Doctor Who territory.
For me, shooting the scenes in the Quarry, yes, that took it to real Doctor Who land, absolutely. And it was really good fun. But I mean, it really looks good on the final film, but it brought some really interesting challenges for the filming day, so it was fun.
I didn't even know we'd got a quarry quite close to us where we were going to be able to film, and it seemed that it was a perfect place to be anyway. And just that general moving around and getting sort of covered in all the dust and things, and the awkwardness of walking on all the stones and things like that, you felt that you were actually having a real sort of experience of being in an alien landscape, I suppose. So that was really good. It was good fun to do that. And it was nice. It's always nice being out on location anyway.
And of course the Quarry sort of looked like the genesis of the Daleks, Skaro, so it kind of felt proper like that.
Every alien planet turns out to be, for budgetary reasons, a quarry near Bletchworth or something else. So yes, it was a fairly conscious decision on our part to bring that into things, and it is the only way on a shoestring budget to get anything that's vaguely off-worldish.
And it was a proper quarry. It was a big chalky quarry with those funny purpley, almost, you know, thistle-like plants growing in it, which you always seem to get in quarries nowhere else.
The thing about working in a quarry these days would be you'd be thinking every other step, insurance.
Trying to stay upright, mainly.
You know, one step this way, one step that could be a big insurance bill.
Hitting your mark and not breaking your neck, basically.
You'd be put there in your suit, lifted in by a cherry picker, not allowed to move, stay there, don't move, it's not in your contract. So, you know, it's great. It takes you back to the first days of television when you're there with some sticking plaster and a bit of plasticine and somebody's dog from next door, and you're making Ben-Hur.
It was the final day of filming, actually. We did all the quarry scenes in one day, and it was the day that Princess Diana was killed, although most of us didn't know that at the time. We'd been driving up and listening to the radio with all this sombre music and wondering what had gone wrong with the world.
We arrived without having listened to the news or anything, and I remember getting out of the car, and I think it was Marianne and Gary were sitting in a car in front of us, and we sort of knocked on the window and said, "Oh, shall we go now?" And Marianne said, "You've not heard, have you?"
We heard the news early that morning that Princess Diana had died. That is totally tied intrinsically with whenever I think of it, for me, because I remember, you know, the news was fresh out and we all arrived at the Quarry, and it was hard to actually focus on what we were there for. I mean, eventually we had to just put that in a box, put that to one side and carry on with what we had to do. But I remember when we all first arrived, everyone was absolutely shell-shocked. I'll never forget that.
We did have a few problems with extras not turning up, so all too often I'd find myself having to don a unit trooper's uniform and double in because there was simply no one else available to do it. The problem became really apparent the day we were filming up at Fort Nelson. It was one of those occasions where people who were supposed to be extras had looked out the window and gone, oh, it's drizzling, they probably won't be filming. Whereas the reality of it was, because we were on such a tight timescale and people were doing us favours, you don't have the luxury of saying, oh, we'll do it another day. You either do it that day or you lose the window of opportunity entirely. So Debs, who was our Dalek operator, took it upon herself to go running around to see who was at the fort and came across this couple, Rob and Tracy Vere, who at that stage were visiting the fort with an aim to use it as a location for their marriage. And she simply asked them, are you two around for the day? Yes, we're just here scoping the place for the wedding. And she said, do you want to do a film? Do you want to be in a film? And they said, oh yeah, okay, that sounds like fun.
Sir, I thought I saw something move down there.
We kept in touch with Rob and Tracy because when they went back to where they lived after filming, no one believed the story until the thing was finished and they were able to sort of send the thing out.
I mean, the main things that I would want to say about it, it was just absolutely brilliant fun. I wish we could do it every day.
Sort of looking back on it, you sort of think, oh, I wish I'd done that and I wish I'd done this, but can't do that now.
It was just very exciting to be filming Doctor Who, because it felt like real proper Doctor Who, because we were filming it and we were in a quarry and there were Daleks there and we were rushing around and there was Land Rovers with unit troops coming out. It doesn't get much more Doctor Who-ish than that, really.
Car